It's coming all the way from London, which is our very, very first over the pond program. So I want to welcome both Brian and Hephzibah Kaplan to the library. And I'll just talk a little bit about them for a second, although you're going to talk about yourself. All right, then one thing I do want to say is they believe, which is, I think most of us all believe, and this is something the Kaplans, both of them believe, that humor is the best medicine. It's a proven fact that we are healthier, we are happier when we are laughing. And I so much agree. So please welcome both Hephzibah and Dr. Brian Kaplan to the program. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Joan, and thank you to Chappaqua Library. Libraries have a very special place in my heart. I have a mother who's a librarian and who ran a library, and I love libraries. I regard them as the cornerstone of civilization, and I've spent many an hour in many libraries. I'm a member of 3 libraries in London, and I love reserving books and only as a desperate a last resort will I buy a book. I much prefer to borrow books from libraries because I love libraries, and I love the fact that other people have enjoyed those
Thank
books.
Thank you.
Okay, so I will begin by and Hephzibah will do the same. We'll begin by telling you a little bit about the story of how we came to write this rather strange book. Okay. At the age of 16, I decided to become a doctor because I thought that would be a way of being useful to people, useful to other people. I thought if I do that training, I didn't know what sort of medicine I was ever going to practice, but I thought this will be something that will be useful to other people, and that's worth studying. However, in getting to medical school, it soon occurred to me and soon became very apparent that what I was going to be taught was the science of medicine, the science, right? The knowledge, the way it is the most incredible science. And I have to say that the things that I learned in the science, the process of DNA, understanding DNA and messenger RNA and all these things that we're hearing bandied about today, but to understand the chemistry of these was magnificent. And so there were many wonderful things, scientific things, but that I had never wanted to be a scientist. I wanted to be someone who worked with people and related to people and helped people in whatever way I could. Okay, so I then, coming out of medical school, I thought that general practice would be the best way to sort of relate more to people, to families, to have a longitudinal attitude in medicine, and in order to follow the families, and I have done that. I have seen, it's lovely to see the children of patients and even the grandchildren today, and that's a wonderful, wonderful thing. However, I still had to find a way of working in general practice that was more holistic, that was more related to the whole person, okay? And this is a different aspect of medicine. It is what a colleague of mine, Roger Neighbor, has called the inner consultation, what is really going on between you and the patient in terms of emotion, feeling, communication, etc., as well as the application of the greatest science, which is medical science. Okay, so I began to spend more time with patients, longer periods. I learned forms of holistic medicine, of whole person orientated approaches involved studying acupuncture, nutritional therapies, deep relaxation therapies, meditation, creative visualization, NLP, all these things I learned because I wanted to be able to relate to people and see if I could get them on my side, because if you can get the patient on your side and that they like you and you feel this is a productive relationship, they're much more likely to be compliant in terms of taking medicine and everything else you would like them to do to look after their health. Everything changed in June 1996, though. In June 1996, someone wrote to me and said, I think this is a seminar that you would enjoy, a workshop, and it was run by Frank Farrelly of Madison, Wisconsin. And all I knew was that this man uses jokes and humor to help people in a type of counseling or psychotherapy, Rogerian counseling was his initial training, and he had developed this into some form of using laughter and humor in the actual work. So I went to Surrey University to see this man for a weekend, and within half an hour of hearing him speak, he only spoke for half an hour of the theory of provocative therapy, which is the cutting edge in the use of humor and reverse psychology to provoke people to come up with their own solutions to their problems. He explained it. It sounded fascinating. But when I saw him demonstrate this with a volunteer, I was transfixed. I felt after a while, my collar was wet. The tears were rolling down my cheeks. I just couldn't believe it. It felt as if I'd finally come home. I'd finally found the type of medicine that I could be deeply, deeply passionate about. And what this story, how this came about is, let's look at, as you said, people feel better and happier when they're laughing. Let's just look at that for a moment. Let's have a look at that for a moment. When you laugh, there are many, many physiological benefits of laughing. Now, this is not pie in the sky. This is not me saying this, yeah, you feel better and, you know, that's good for your health. This is science. And the great scientist who established this was a man called Professor Bill Fry of Stanford University, who devoted 25 years of his life to what he called gelotology, the study of the health benefits of laughter. So let me just summarize these briefly. So let's first, in other words, make the case for laughter being good for your physical health. So I composed an acrostic to help me remember some of Fry's established facts of how laughter was good for our health and is good for our health. So I called this acrostic SMILEE, S-M-I-L-E-E, SMILEE. S stands for stress reduction. And just to go into the science of this, it can be proved. There are stress hormones in the body that when those are up, you're more stressed. They go up with stress. These are known here as noradrenaline and adrenaline. And in the United States, they're known as epinephrine and norepinephrine. And in both sides of the Atlantic, cortisol. These are the stress hormones by which you can measure stress. And sure enough, after a good belly laugh, and it's the louder you laugh and the more deeply it is in your body that you really did a belly laugh, the more benefits you get. This is established as well. So stress is reduced. M stands for muscular relaxation. This has been proved by electromyography that muscles become more relaxed, even though we wouldn't know that. I stands for immunity. Now, immunity actually goes up. This can be measured. You can measure antibodies. IgG goes up. L stands for lung function. Lung function improves because when we laugh, we expel what is known as the residual volume of air from our lungs. And this allows more fresh air to enter the lungs. And E stands for both exercise. Laughing is actually a form of exercise and quite a good form, actually, a belly laugh. And E also stands for endorphins, which are the good, natural, high-making, good-feeling-making hormones in the body. These go up as well. So therefore, we have many, many benefits of laughter. There are studies that show that people who smile and laugh live longer, cardiac protection, more and more stuff is actually coming out. More stuff since Bill Fry's work, more stuff proving that laughter is good for us. Physical health has come out. Now, that is physical. Now, of course, we can say psychological, okay? Psychological health, of course. A person who's laughing is looking happy. I mean, anyone in this audience ever met someone who says, I hate laughing. I just like it when my body is vibrating with joy and my face is smiling and I'm out of control with convulsions of euphoria. No, no one ever says this. Okay, so we know that is a general psychological tonic. This is what laughter can do for us psychologically. So we've said physically, now we've said general psychologically. What I saw Frank Farrelly do in that day in June 1996 was use humor and reverse psychology, which we'll come on to in a minute, to actually provoke people to come up with their own solutions. And we will talk about more about this, but I think it's time for me to hand over to my lovely wife, Hephzibah, who will tell you her story and how she came to write this book.
Thanks, Brian. So my name is Hephzibah Kaplan. I'm born and bred in London. Since before I could even talk, I was given art materials to play with. And I've always been an artist, and I've always been interested in the language of art. And fast forward, very fascinated by the notion of the medium is the message. Marshall McLuhan's very useful idea how graphic design can impact somebody. And if you imagine can you imagine the logo of an ice cream shop would be very different if it was made in steel or if it was made in velvet. The idea that the materiality of fonts and images can actually affect the way we relate to it. I subsequently became an art therapist, and in 2010, I set up and run London Art Therapy Centre and have quite a busy practice. 32 years ago, Brian and I got married. We have a shared love of comedy. We have a shared love of art, a shared love of humor and literature. And so it was obvious in a way that our joint interests would be part of developing this book, which uses art, imagery, humor, comedy, and within our own disciplines to affect change. How can we consciously use comedy for the benefit of people? And this was the starting premise of the book. One of the interesting thoughts that we had was, well, what are we actually going to be laughing at? There is a single self-assumption that we are only one self, but in fact, we are a multiplicity of selves. And without making it too complex in this sort of short presentation, if we can imagine that there's a part of me that might want a piece of cheesecake, and then there's another part of me, the sensible part, that goes, you better not have any. And maybe there's the petulant teenager that goes, I'm going to have it anyway. And here we've got these three voices. Now, if that petulant teenager was continually going to rule the roost and got over loud and over domineering, it would not be good for my mind, body, or spirit. And this notion is that we can actually identify this part of me or the part of ourselves, these different subselves that might be becoming too loud, too domineering. And can we use humor to lampoon, to tease, to jest in order to quieten down that over loud subself? And that is the premise of the book. Right.
Yes. Let's be clear, the development, let's be clear about the development from Frank Farrelly's wonderful work in provocative therapy. He produced a number of tools of provocative therapy. So Frank, for example, a tool of provocative therapy is to say to the person, and remember, when you work with someone in this way, you absolutely have to ask for permission. So I will say to people, do I have your permission in the next hour to say things to you that in any other context could easily be seen as provocative, absurd, ridiculous, surreal, scatological, eschatological, crazy? Can I play the crazy guru? And they say, yes, yes, yes. Okay, so this is established. Okay, I can say whatever I want. I can say whatever I want, but I cannot say it how I want. It's very important that I say it in a certain way. And the way that the golden rule of this approach of provocative therapy is to say, you can say what you like, really, as long as you say it with affection in the heart and a twinkle in the eye. You have to show that you're playing with someone. So this is never inflicted on people. No one is ever ambushed by someone doing this approach. They absolutely volunteer for it. And that's why sometimes when I've demonstrated this, other counselors and therapists and people often can say, oh, my patients, my clients wouldn't put up with this. Well, maybe not, but they haven't chosen it. They've chosen to come to you. People that want this type of work choose it, okay? So Frank had a number of these tools. The first one, there is no solution to your problem, came from when he worked at a place called Mendota State Institute near Madison. I visited it. and it looks like the Frankenstein place a little bit like the Frankenstein place in the Rocky Horror Picture Show, actually with a green grounds and a sort of Gothic looking building. It does look a bit like that, but that's where he was. And he was a very severe paranoid schizophrenic patient there. And he worked with this person using the Rogerian counseling, but to no effect, absolutely nothing. And then for some reason, which he doesn't remember why, he just suddenly said to the person, you know what, you've convinced me there is no solution to your problem. And he just couldn't believe the effect. This person who had been gloomy and very slow and quiet suddenly became animated. What do you mean there's no solution to my problem? And he realized something's happened. This person has become animated. They don't look so depressed anymore. What on earth is going on, thought Frank Farrelly. I must carry on. And that was the birth of provocative therapy. This person was discharged a few months later, eventually came off medication. And then many months later, years later, Farrelly and his wife, June, were having dinner in a restaurant in Madison. And guess what? The maitre d' was this man that he'd help. And he said, Mr. Farrelly, I've always wanted to see you again. I want to thank you. Everything's on the house, the wine, everything is on the house. You pay for nothing. And Frank Farrelly said to him, and damn right after what I did for you. So he was quite a character, Frank. He died in 2013, but by that time, I'd had, 17 years of fantastic education in this process. So let's go back to what Hephzibah was saying. Yes, if we laugh, physical benefits and general psychological benefits, but to get specific psychological benefits, we need to ask the question, at what are you laughing? And this is why I've even thought, it's not in the book, but I've had the chutzpah to even call this neo-humor, a new type of humor that is not just laughter, but gets you to laugh at the parts of yourself that are holding you back. These could be called subpersonalities, subselves, but they are all, when they're in balance, then we have a harmony, a symphony of subselves. But if one subself grabs the megaphone and starts dominating, the inner child starts dominating, you're going to get an ineffectual adult that is too childish, okay? If the inner critic starts dominating, this inner critic, this person is going to be full of lacking of confidence and enormously self-critical. But if they can see this is only a part of their personality and laugh at that part of their personality, then this subself must quieten down, because as one of your great humorists, American humorists, Mark Twain, put it beautifully, against the assault of laughter, nothing can stand. So once you laugh at the part of yourself that's holding you back, once you laugh at it, it is instantly disempowered. This is our addition to Farrelly's work. This is the development of the work in not just laughing at oneself, because one's essential self is sacred, but one can certainly laugh at loud, domineering subcells that have grabbed the microphone and are dominating and taking the oxygen away from other subcells that need to express themselves as well. Hephzibah.
So Brian and I, we practiced for many years as clinicians. We're working with patients, working with the general public, working in the corporate sector, and introducing this idea that we can use humor to affect change in people. And then we started to characterize, we'd see patterns in people, and we started to characterize these different subselves that we encountered. And we made up names for these subselves. One of the provocative tools developed by Farrelly was to label and categorize the patient. This is his language. And the idea is, so in our book, we include 114 subselves. I'm going to just flick through it to give you a sense of the visions of the book. So we've got 114 subselves that we developed, and this is an original word, for example, mismarriage. I think everything in the book, there's two of them that are not original. All the rest are original words. Brian, maybe you'd like to read something.
Yes,
Talk
okay,
about
so
this marriage.
let's have a look. So this is an actual, what you'd call, that is a graphic of a physical button, okay? So here, for example, is the Almost Happy button that I'm wearing now. So there is the actual physical button, okay? That's a 22 millimeter, what we call a badge, over here on this side of the pond, but which I understand is called a button in America, okay? So therefore you're flipping through the book and say you think, all right, I've got a few marital problems or whatever, but and I wouldn't mind, you know, a person flips. I've watched people read this book, and you don't actually have to read this book to benefit from it. You can flip through and look at the pictures until one of the pictures strikes you. Then, if it strikes you, now read the text on the other side. Now read the text on the other side. So it will say there, if you have a look there at the text, who is this button for? Okay, who is this button for? And then provocative suggestions underneath there. Okay, so that's the page opposite the button. So who is it for? Anyone who thinks they've married the wrong person. It's for married couples who lack a mutual interest in sex and pretty much everything else. And it's also for adulterers. Okay, provocative suggestions. Now, these provocative suggestions are typical of the things that would be said in a session of provocative therapy. And before I say provocative therapy, I want to emphasize that this book, ironically entitled Almost Happy, is not only for therapy. It's not only for people that think they need therapy. It's for everyone. Happiness is a continuum, right? You can go up from contentment to pleasure to joy, even to higher states of euphoria, right? So there's always a way of moving up. So the almost happy is a very, very ironic term. It is a button itself. In other words, person is almost happy. That's a subself. I'm almost happy. If only then I'd be happy. Okay. So provocative suggestions for this button, miss marriage. Provocative suggestions. This is typical, what I might say in a session. My heart goes out to you if you're unhappily married, because I'm happily married and it's terrible. Okay. Cement your marriage by having a few more kids. There's a suggestion. Bear in mind that the first 40 years of marriage are the hardest, and be grateful that you're not being bled dry by a divorce lawyer yet.
So each button, unique button, is a unique graphics designed by Brian and myself, is accompanied by suggestions that are provocative suggestions. Actually, they could be spelled SUJESTIONS because they are delivered with humor, with love, and with goodwill. And we outline who it's for. Within the book, you'll probably find several buttons that suit your various subselves. And in fact, we had a bit of fun trying to find all the buttons for Donald Trump. I hope I'm not being too political here, but we found about 40 buttons that suited him. So it's also quite a nice idea to flick through the book. You recognize yourself, you recognize your family members, you recognize people you work with, you might recognize people in the news as well. And when you look through, you'll find some useful suggestions so that if you are so inclined to tease people, to try and get the best out of them, you might think about the turn of phrase, some of the language, and think about what might be a fun way to coax them out of this dominant subself and to get it to quieten down.
Yes, as the dominant subself, if you laugh at the part of yourself, if you can be induced to laugh at the part of yourself that's holding you back, you will change from wherever you are on the happiness continuum. Not just for people that are unhappy or depressed or anxious, although they absolutely can benefit from this, but this is for everybody. This is for a person that might be very happy. They will still find a comic mirror, which is represented by a badge in our book or button, that is a comic mirror for part of themselves that is holding them back. If you laugh at the part of yourself that is holding you back, you will disempower that part of yourself to a degree. Now, it's very important to understand that these subselves all have a place. They aren't bad subselves. Every subself has a place, okay? And therefore, it can be called on at a certain time. The problem is if one subself just becomes very, very dominant. For example, Hephzibah, you can talk about this one.
Well, there are a lot of people that still blame their parents. It's sort of a rite of passage to blame one's parents when one is a kid. But actually, as an adult, it starts to become less and less appealing to blame one's parents. So, what actually we can do is we can intentionally encourage people to blame their parents when we're working with people. Why don't you just blame your parents? In fact, don't just blame your parents. You need to blame your grandparents, your teachers, the government. How about blaming God, blaming the environment? In other words, can we extrapolate to absurdity, just ramp it up so much that it becomes absurd if we can make fun of how people are playing the blame game? And Trump, previously mentioned, is a great exponent of playing the blame game.
Yeah, I mean, the provocative suggestions here are that go next to this button in the book are, I just show the book for a second how it works again. Next to the book, that's on the left-hand side. So here, the provocative suggestions that go with this button are: punish your parents for their errors by suing them, divorcing them, converting to a new religion, or buying yourself a big motorbike. That was the first suggestion. We thought of calling these suggestions SUJESTIONS, suggestions, with a big jest in the middle of suggestion. Okay, the second suggestion is continue to play the blame game, but give your parents a break by letting siblings, friends, neighbors, teachers, therapists, politicians, the economy, and the weather share the blame for your woes.
The book is divided into 5 chapters. We have initial introduction, just setting out our approach and the work. It's a very quick read. The whole book's about 40 minutes, but it's the sort of book that you keep returning to because it's a reference book, actually. So after the introduction, the first chapter is bad habits. So we have the selection of bad habits: the alcohol, the drugs, the eating habits, the online habits. The second chapter is love, sex, and relationships. So we're looking at how the various subselfs get in the way of healthy relationships. Chapter 3 is work, power, and money. And a lot of people have stories around work, power, and money, whether they're happy at work or they're unhappy at work. How do they get fulfillment? The 4th chapter is about health and well-being. And that might include all sorts of ideas, from medication to being a professional patient. This is kind of the bane of doctors' lives nowadays, is being a professional patient. And chapter 5 is the miscellaneous. It's all the people who think they're right, or special, or superior, or woke, or the ones that just go, yes, but, yes, but, yes, yes, but.
Yeah, let's have a look at professional patient. That's one of my favorites. Here it is. Okay, professional patient. Let's see if we can see that clearly. There it is. Professional patient. So it looks, yeah, you can type in your symptoms there and go on Google and dispense with doctors. As it says here, who's this button for? Amateur doctors who believe that much can be accomplished with the help of a friendly pharmacist. Those who choose to eschew medical doctors and consult Dr. Google and WebMD. People extracting the absolute maximum from their medical insurance, sufferers from Munchausen syndrome. Provocative suggestions: surf the internet daily to stay abreast of the latest research on your various ailments, and never take medical advice without getting a second and preferably a third opinion.
And one of the most popular issues that a lot of people talk to us about, whether it's here, whether it's on Clubhouse, whether it's through our workshops, is the issue of procrastination. All those people that are starting tomorrow, their tax accounts, their PhD, their diet, their novel, their tidy up. And so we've got some humorous things to say about starting tomorrow. After we finish the 5 chapters of the book, we have 3 appendices. And the appendices are the more theoretical background. We've looked at the table of tools that we're using, which are the provocative interventions to activate the inner jester in you, because we really believe that once you find your own subselves funny, and you can embrace the idiocy of how we might sometimes be managing and making excuses for our lives, then you cultivate a sense of agency, and you can kind of quieten that down. And we have a diagram looking at the dynamic, and then we have a theoretical table of all the various names and monikers and turns of phrase for the I positions, the subselves, the imagos, the ids, the archetypes, and all the psychologists and researchers throughout the years who've referred to this notion of subselves.
That we are not one essential self, that we are many selves, subselves, and these subselves. For example, that we are not the first people to work with subselves, that's for sure. I was very influenced by Helen Sidra Stone of who live in California, who wrote a book called Voice Dialogue. And what they did is get the selves to sort of negotiate amongst themselves and talk amongst themselves, and then the control of all the selves, which is you, can persuade other selves to keep quiet, etc. So I did see this work, and I did work with them, and I'm grateful to them, and we've attributed this learning to them in the book. What they didn't do is use the laughter, the idea of laughing at a part of yourself or a subself that is holding you back. Now, you might think, is this a serious way of helping people? Is the objective is this a joke? No, it's not a joke. It's just a way of talking to people that is completely different, a way of communicating to people something that's completely different, which is what the book does. It is an utterly light-hearted, yes, but its objective is just as serious as any person, any professional would want to be that wants to help other people. It's a serious aid to the helping professions. Now, the talk, as it were, when one is speaking to somebody with this approach, or when one is reading the book, may not seem serious. But as Oscar Wilde put it, which is the other quote besides the Mark Twain one about against the assault of laughter, nothing can stand. The other quote is by Oscar Wilde from this side of the pond, who said something that epitomizes the sort of conversations that we have, and it also epitomizes the relationship you'll have while reading the book, and that is, life is far too important a thing ever to talk seriously about it. And that is, the fact doesn't mean that we are not serious about our objective. When we work this process, when this process is always clear in this process that we are exuding the desire that you laugh at this part of yourself, that you have an epiphany or an aha moment or a eureka moment, that you laugh. Now, if you laugh, and say you're reading the book and you happen to laugh, you happen to see a button like this. It could be because you're too much of a complainer or whatever, and you laugh. Yeah, I am a bit of a kvetch or a complainer, or I do moan a bit too much, and you laugh. You remember that experience, whether it is done in person or whether it is reading our book. When you laugh at something, you will remember it. And therefore, the laughter, your own laughing will go with you into the future. And you will remember that you laughed at that part of yourself when you did that, whether it was in an interaction with a professional or reading a book like this.
Okay, and I'll just give you a kind of one final example of a button before we be delighted to take some questions. Just working with the client today, and was talking about, he was so concerned about making mistakes. He was so concerned that this wasn't going to work out. He was concerned that this was going to fail. And I said to him, you've got a severe case of what-if-itis. And I kept calling it what-if-itis. And I said, you're catastrophizing, what-if-itis. And by repeating this what-if-itis, he started recoiling from that idea himself. So our hope is, or I wish we could promise, you're going to read the book and you will go, well, that's also me. I've got to curb that. I've got to watch this a bit and try and tone it down.
Yes, I just want to mention, I had to go, it is such an enjoyable book to read, and the provocative suggestions, you think that we've all thought that this is really, I can't stand something, and I see it, you agree with what I'm thinking, and it's sort of a reaffirmation of who I am, and that there are other people just like me, you. And I loved it. We have the book, and it's easy. It's so easy, and it just sort of buoys you up. You feel good after it. And we were talking about this before the program started, and I was relating some of the fun things I had. And you're right. When I think of them, I start laughing. I remember I laughed, and I continue to laugh. So I'm just telling the audience, if you have questions, there is a chat function at the very bottom of your screen. If you would just type in your question, and then I could read it, or actually they could read the question and answer it. So please type in any questions you have. And the book is very unique. It's different than any other book you've ever read. I mean, it's not, but it is a self-help book. It is,
and it was published in South Carolina.
American.
Well, you wouldn't have. We were forced to spell at gunpoint to spell humor HUMOR, Joan.
Oh, I bet. I see somebody raise their hand. Please put it in the chat function. This way it's easy. We've had some trouble in the past with the raising of the hand and the Q&A. So we use the chat function now. The libraries have been Zoom bombed. So we have to keep it at the chat function. So please do that.
Well, let's try another button while we're waiting. So here, this is an obvious button for who this is for, okay?
The no
for many people,
powderer.
Brian.
Okay.
I've related to so many already. It's amazing.
Okay, so that one. So now you could say, all right, here you've got someone that's spending their money on cocaine, they're messing up their life. Many have done this, okay? Many have done this. Who's this button for? Cokeheads, snowbirds, schnaufers, and other wired individuals. Okay, provocative suggestions. Far from saying, oh, this is going to damage your health and it's going to affect your nasal septum and it's a waste of money. They've heard all of that, you see? It hasn't worked, okay? But imagine they said this: be proud and grateful that you can afford to consume a substance more expensive than gold and seldom as pure. When you are high, use your phone to record your conversations so that all the kind and wise things you say are preserved, and ask your doctors to prescribe the best sedatives to ease the pain of coming down. That will get a different type of reaction.
Yeah, your quirk is so quirky. There's a question about where they could purchase the book.
Okay, so the book is, thank you very much. The book is available Barnes & Noble, Amazon, and all other reputable booksellers. And certainly, you know, we love people supporting independent bookshops as well and supporting the libraries. Our website, almosthappy.com, it has lots of additional articles. If you go to the articles section of the website, you can read extra stuff about the use of images and questions about provocative therapy, reverse psychology. It's got listings of media references. And also on the website, you can buy and choose your own buttons, your specific buttons. And we're very happy to send them out to you.
So we'll send them, we send the buttons from London, but the book is in the States, right? So if you order the book on Barnes & Noble or Amazon or any shop there, you'll get it quickly in the States. The button will take you a while, and we'll set you back the tremendous sum of $2, which is about 2% or less than 1% of a session with a professional. But yes, so that's you can wear your button. But I'm glad you asked that, because you see, as I say, I'm wearing an Almost Happy button now. But how do you use the buttons? This is actually a very important point. The average person will wear buttons. So here's another one. I'll just show you. I like to show the buttons themselves here so that you can actually see these are wearable buttons. Okay. All right. Shout. I shout. That's the button.
Yeah.
And okay. So you could say, all right, if I was had a tendency to shout, I would put this in my wallet. Okay. That's what the average person will do. The average person, the most common thing is just to put it in your wallet. Okay. And then you notice it and you think, oh, yeah, that's part of me that I need to control. And it reminds you of the laughter. of the impact when you read this in the book. Okay. And okay, so that's the first thing, just to leave it in your wallet or your purse or whatever. Okay, now the next level is you could wear it, like I'm wearing an almost happy button there, and wear it with family and friends, or just looking at yourself in the mirror wearing it. Oh yeah, I'm almost happy, or I shout, or that's whatever. Okay, so you wear it yourself and look in the mirror and you work on yourself like that. Then you could wear it with family and friends, but I have had maybe 20% of people who will go and wear it in public. There's one button called On Diet, and that button was worn by someone even on an airplane, and he was amazed that if you start making fun of yourself, people love it. People come up to you, but this is for the more extroverted person to wear. But I do know someone who wore Starting Tomorrow, the button Starting Tomorrow, which we've shown you, which is for procrastination, wore to the supermarket and even asked people what they thought of it, and had a lot of people laughing at it. And buttons have always been used. We didn't invent buttons. We just found a completely different way of using buttons in this approach, which always the aim is push you up the happiness continuum, push yourself up the happiness continuum by reminding yourself that it's quite funny, the parts of yourself that are holding you back. It's quite an inner joke that you have, and you share with many people. You share it with many people. There's no button here. There aren't hundreds of thousands of other people. What makes you fairly unique, and not, there will still be a few that share this with you, is the combination of buttons that you would select out of the 114, the 5 or 7 or 9. That is unique, right? That would make you, then there might be a few other people in the world who have that particular combination. That makes you pretty unique, your combination of buttons that push your buttons with reverse psychology.
We had a lovely question here about how do you ask permission if you want to be provocative with friends or family or colleagues? And you can do it in quite a light way. The golden rule in using this approach, as Brian has said, and we can't repeat it enough, is to have affection in the heart and a twinkle in the eye, to be playful, to be jesting. And so once you get into that space, and you can also call it loving, is to say to somebody, I've just thought of a funny way. I've thought of something a bit provocative or a bit quirky, or can I say something a bit teasing? Whatever suits your own kind of particular nuance, but you ask permission in that way. And then when people say yes, then you can say, have you ever thought of? And then you could go for it. And ultimately, I think, Brian, I think this is the most significant button in the book. And this is one of the aims that we're trying to get to.
Well, if you get the buttons that are loud and dominating to quieten down a bit, you will be left with this this button inside you will be allowed to express itself, the voice of conscience. And the voice of conscience sort of knows what you need to do. Then if you can get to that, if you can get the other interrupting loud voices to shut up, the voice of conscience will emerge. And then the people just suddenly start saying what they need to do, and they disagree with you. You see, what we do and what the book does is it takes your situation and it extrapolates to absolute absurdity. So it's an extrapolation to absurdity. But in the extrapolation to absurdity, yes, the extrapolation is absurd. But even before the extrapolation, you begin to see there's some absurdity in how it was before you extrapolated. And when you start laughing, not only at the extrapolation, but what happened before the extrapolation, now you're doing work on yourself. And this is, I believe this is a very cost-effective approach. I mean, the book is going to give you value for sure. I mean, you will, even if you just page the book in 15 minutes, you will find a button and you will laugh at something. And this, we have watched so many people read this book. That is what happens. They page, and then there's a freeze, and then they laugh and they smile or whatever happens. Occasionally, you might even see laughter and tears at the same time. Mostly it's laughter, but sometimes even laughter and tears, because and in that situation, you're doing work on yourself, and the work on yourself can be a little painful. But now the laughter is there as a balm, as a medicine to get you smoothly through this process. And the final thing I'd want to say is that one thing about all this approach in the book, taking you up the happiness continuum, taking you from wherever you are in the happiness continuum, whether it be sad or almost happy or happy, higher, to get you to joy, euphoria, whatever it is. This isn't new. Why isn't it new? Because, yes, laughing at the subselfs is new, but humor, you talking to someone with humor is not new. If we go out now, even now, if you go out into New York now, what is it, nearly 8 o'clock, and go out and visit some pubs, and if people are going to pubs or bars or restaurants, you will find, if we could listen in on conversations, we would find people who are helping other people that they love, friends, family, whatever it is, helping them. And there's a situation where someone is helping someone else. How likely it is that there would be a joke. They would be induced to laugh. And yet in the professional world, this isn't the case. How can we not emulate the way that people have helped each other through problems for thousands of years? So this is just saying, yes, we can use laughter and reverse psychology and jokes, and we can do it. If we do it with affection in the heart and the twinkle in the eye, it is immensely effective. The book obviously doesn't have hopefully we've imbued this book with a twinkle in the eye and laughter. But when you laugh at something of part of yourself that's holding you back, you remember that experience. And I can remember 6-year program at university that I went to. There's not a lot I remember, but there was one professor, Professor Philip Tobias. He always made a joke. I remember him lying on the table in front of us, 200 students, and showing us how the fetus moved in the womb. And I never forgot that. I laughed at it. Unbelievable. What he did, and this is the process here, is you throw away your dignity for the benefit of the client. And that's what he did. He threw away his dignity as a professor to make sure that we never, ever forgot that, because we laughed when we learned it. And here's the approach here. You have an epiphany, you're having a realization. What is an epiphany? A sudden realization of seeing something in a new light. When you laugh at that, and the laugh will go with you, and you will remember what you learned when you were laughing. That's the process.
That is so true. That is so true. People who could throw away, release that dignity and then make it for you. They're doing it for you. So yeah. How could you say it's anything but fantastic, right? I love it. What's the most surprising thing that you ever discovered when you were writing this book?
I think for me, was the range of interests. So we tested it because it'd been in development for 20 years. And every day we would come home from our clinical work and discuss kind of ideas and more people and these sorts of presentations and struggles that people were just having in their everyday lives. So sometimes, we would find buttons that we thought we've got to do a button for people who are just employed. They've got a day job. In English, it's called a job's worth. It's more than my job's worth. It's more than my job's worth to kind of bend the rules, and thinking, well, that's not very funny, having a button called employee, but actually what a good response it had with a lot of people, finding buttons that we were not consistently necessarily correlated with our own humor, but they spoke to people. And that was what was interesting. People from different countries, different levels of education, different ages, are all looking to kind of subvert something within in order to kind of a wake-up call, in order to have that jolt, in order to kind of surprise people out of their kind of deluded repetition and have a bit of fun in life.
Yeah, I would share that. I think that is the most remarkable thing, and that was only available to us when we'd actually written the book and put it in someone's hands and watched them read it. It was that sometimes we would wonder, oh, I haven't seen anyone laugh at that button. And then that suddenly, I remember watching people, there's a button called in trance. Now, most people wouldn't get it, but the people who do get it, most people would flip past that page. But then I had this couple, and they came to this, they hadn't laughed for a while, and they came to this one called in trance, and they both burst out hysterically laughing, and no one else had laughed at that button, which means that if we showed it to thousands of people, we would have reactions to every single button. So that was the most remarkable thing we saw. That yes, of course, Mona, the picture Mona, that one, yes, everyone laughs at that one because it's the Mona Lisa. It's a pun.
Right,
everyone can moan a bit, but there are other more esoteric ones for little habits and things that people have, and that's what I just love, seeing someone laugh at a new button that I hadn't seen people laugh at before.
And you could go back and back to it, and you just keep going back, because if you laughed once, you want to read it again because it puts you in such a good mood.
I hope they don't disturb the other borrowers in your library when people open up and start reading.
But just knowing from our practice, not just from having the test readers or the wonderful testimonials that we've been receiving from the book, and some fantastic testimonials from all sorts of people, but just knowing that it works, knowing that the heroin addict stopped injecting, knowing that the person with eating disorders started eating, knowing that people's anxiety was curbed. These things make a difference, that somebody actually started or completed their PhD because of the provocations and the provocative suggestions. If people are benefiting from it, that is beautiful.
And it's going to carry on. The making of the buttons does not end. There's at least another 60 buttons that we've made since the book went into press, etc. So we're not stopping,
So you're writing another book?
Sorry?
Are you writing?
More buttons, more almost happy buttons. Okay.
Almost happy, or more than almost happy, or up the happiness continuum.
Up
there you go. I like it.
Yeah, that's the bottom line. This isn't therapy. This is for everybody. This is for people I wouldn't even call it therapy. I would call it self-help, as you called it right at the beginning of this, stream. You said it's self-help. Yes, very much so. Self-help with comedy, okay?
Right.
Using comedy as self-help.
That's the best way to go. I mean, you realize you're amongst others like you. I love it. I just love that idea. So if you have any questions, put it in now. We only have a few minutes left. And while you're typing, I just want to mention, because I think it fits in well with your discussion, we're going to be having a film series at the library beginning on June 16th. I think it's a Thursday at 7, virtually. It's going to be online. Of humor in different countries. And the first program we're having is British humor versus French humor. And so, how the French and the Brits look at things differently. And then there'll be Japanese versus Chinese, and it'll just keep on going, all about humor. So I think right now the Americans and the British have the same humor.
Yes, the humor.
You
mentioned Chinese, Joan. Our son is a Mandarin student, and he studied at Oxford and Johns Hopkins, and he studied crosstalk. One of his essays was on crosstalk, Chinese humor. I was actually starting to get into that and see if I can get the Chinese interested in this.
That's so interesting.
But actually, in terms of the comedians, because yes, Brian and I, we study comedians, we've gone to clowning workshops, drama, improv and everything, just to kind of free up that creative muscle as well. But one of the projects Brian did a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, prior to the pandemic, it was beautiful. He did a series of podcasts where he interviewed British comedians about their health. And their podcasts are on Apple iTunes, and they're called Are You Feeling Funny? Are You Feeling Funny? And he asked top British comedians about their body, mind, spirit health and funny stories that happened, and the openness and the relaxed nature of these sort of 28 to 39 minute podcasts. Absolutely delightful.
And finally, I want to say to anyone who's listening to this, if you'd like to hear and see how this approach actually works, we do a session on the app Clubhouse at 7 p.m. British Standard Time. That translates to 2 p.m. Eastern United States time, every day, 7 days a week for half an hour. We do it, and you will see this process. And the room is called Get Epiphanies Through Humor. Get Epiphanies Through Humor. There's another room called Almost Happy, which opens every Tuesday night at 2:35 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But this one, Get Epiphanies Through Humor, is open 7 p.m. British Standard Time, 2 p.m. United States Eastern Time, every day, and it's 1 minute suggestions. In other words, people volunteer to engage with us, they give permission, and they get a 1 minute of the suggestions and a badge and a button, okay, or two, every night. So you can actually see this process. Here's the book, but you want to see the process in action, come to the Clubhouse, Get Epiphanies Through Humor room, any day of the week, 7 days a week at 2 p.m. Standard United States Eastern Time.
Right. I just asked if you would type that name of the program.
Are you feeling funny?
I see. Okay.
Podcast.
Are you feeling funny podcast?
And just put Epiphanies Through Humor there, Hephzibah, so that, yeah.
Yeah.
And the Clubhouse is 2 p.m. EST. Get Epiphanies.
Get Epiphanies Through Humor.
That would be very helpful because it's right there, and we'll give people a chance to copy it down.
There you go. Okay, yeah. So
There
that's,
you
you can see this process in action, and that is the most convincing. But the book is a fun self-help book where you will laugh out aloud, and when you learn something, if you laugh out aloud, you'll remember it.
It's a wonderful book. I urge everyone. You know, it's been pretty hard during the pandemic, and this is just a light breath of fresh air. It's a different way to look at everything. So I urge you all. I did have some that I wanted to talk about, but we're running out of time. So I want to thank both of you for coming here and staying up so late, or else you took a nap today.
Pleasure.
I don't need to know, but I know that you're here now, and I thank you so much. I thank you for coming here.
Thank you.
And of course, I thank the Chappaqua audience and the surrounding communities for attending this program. And if you enjoyed the program, I just want to tell everyone, you could give the Chappaqua Library has videotaped it, and you can see it on our website by simply going to our website, which is chappaqua.library.org, and scrolling down, and you could see all the videos that we have. And you could send it to your friends so they too could share this unique humor. You know,
and if you live in Westchester, you don't even have to buy the book. You just have to go to the Chappaqua Library. They've got it there. If you don't live in Westchester, then you may have to buy the book.
It's a great stocking filler, by the way. It's a really great stocking filler. It's a chunky little sweet handbag one. Yeah.
And you'll also, but it doesn't come equipped with these little tags, which we've all wanted to, it's unique for everybody. It's something for everybody. So again, thank you both. I really appreciate you staying up, and I appreciate this program. So thank you all for coming. If you have, it is time, and we have to end the program. So thank you again, and have a nice, stay safe, everyone, and stay well. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye-bye.